Welcome to another episode. This is Todd from Figure Fiend. This episode I'm going to cover Aurora kits from a painting perspective and also from a development perspective for Monolith toys. I'd like to start by showing some of the Aurora stuff for those of you who are unfamiliar. They had some amazing box art at the time, and I was really inspired by the original ads from Famous Monsters and Starlog. These ads inspired me to seek these models out as a kid, so I would basically search flea markets and yard sales, and as I picked these up, I went through a process of painting these in my teenage years, and then later repainting them in my 20s, and then recently doing touch-ups and that sort of thing. So these are the original kits that I'd found I picked up over the years from my teens into my 20s. And some of them lost pieces along the way, like Dracula's bats. The creature is one of the ones that I did a complete repaint of, as you can see here, that I just wasn't happy with the original color schemes and wanted to make them more warm and detailed. Last year I did a round of Aurora style Mego figures under the Tiny Plastic Men stuff. So once it came to getting the head sculpted and getting the paint worked up, it was really done to match the box art as much as possible. And one thing I wanted to do was take photos of these guys in front of the background. So each one of these backgrounds I painted by hand. Because of the original box art, the figures were in the way. And once those were done, I printed them out on heavy cardstock and made a base and then photographed the figures in front of those. I wanted it to be physical so I could light the background as well as the figure, and the figures could throw shadows onto the background surface. And it was sort of looking at the lighting as well in the painting and trying to match it from an headlight perspective as much as possible. John and I do Monolith toys together. And one of the things that we always wanted to do was a model kit, an Aurora style model kit. So we had a sculptor working on the Nosferatu kit. I was assisting on the base. That's sort of my basis for how I got started sculpting, is from working on his model and then reworking it. It sort of gave me more experience with sculpting, so I began sculpting all the stuff after that. This is the first test run of the kit itself. Each kit takes about 12 hours to print. And then these show the first test run at the kit at full scale with all the pieces, how it's meant to join together. It was really pretty amazing to work on, to look at problem solving, that sort of thing. Now the next phase for me was doing an underpainting for the box. We wanted the tall Aurora style shoebox. So I worked on this underpainting for several hours and then worked on the layout to get all the components set up as expected. And once I had that layout done, I was able to print out a test. I cut it, sized it next to the figure, making sure everything was correct from the layout perspective. And then worked on the color version to have that set up for printing. One thing I did look at is I wasn't very happy with the head and hands specifically and the amount of detail in those areas. So I went over the painting and did another version, repainted the head and hands, and was much happier with it. Once that was done, we then moved on to getting the figure done in a Frightening Lightning version with glow elements, because it's something we discussed. We obviously love those kits, as many people do, and getting something in just black resin with glow pieces was definitely really exciting to add another figure to the models that we'd be selling. And this is the glow test, just testing out the resins. The first times we had used the glow resins, and they were fantastic. So I also went back and I repainted the box art to resemble the Frightening Lightning. This is the layout and the colors for that. Once the boxes came back at this point, I was then looking at doing the painting of the figure itself for photography, for ads. This shows my underpainting of the actual figure, adding shadows, and then reworking my way up to add highlights and do details in that way. Once that phase was done, I was able to photograph it in a series of poses that we could use as ads to show the final figure completely painted, having the definition and paying enough attention to the way the box art was done so that I could match my painting with my painting for the box art itself. Now, the box is not something we could have done ourselves. It's just too large, too complicated, and we wanted a certain look. The original run that we had done with a real printer was several hundred, and they came back in a matte finish, which looked great, but it was a little too dull, so we had the printer run off these more glossy color tests that really made the colors more saturated, more vibrant, and that was the box that we ended up going with. This shows the final boxes next to the figure and scale, and really happy with the way they came out. The surface, the box, the thickness, all the proportions of that, exactly that of the Aurora kit, and we were very satisfied with it. We had the idea also to do a mini version that I thought would be a lot of fun to sell for people that didn't want a full-size kit, maybe something they didn't have to paint. So I did another painting that was resembling the second series glow box that they did after the Frightening Lightning. So after I did the first frontal painting, I then did the box layout, and we then set about doing some color versions of these. I thought that would be really fun to have these sort of pop colors with some tinted glow that were much more vibrant, and went to also considering a half-size kit, which is what you see here, because I like the idea of like a matchbox kind of thing where you could slide it open and have the figure and just a few pieces that you would just pop together to simplify the process for people to put on a shelf. And these were almost 5 inches tall, so it's exactly 50% of the Aurora style kit. And those were done in the standard and then the Frightening Lightning style glow. Now, we do have some of this stuff up on the Monolith shop. As you can see, there are several kits and several half-size kits still available for anybody interested, and everything's free shipping. Here we are at a model convention in Ohio. It was a monster and sci-fi model convention. You can see the actual Aurora kits in the back there. And one thing that towards the end of the convention, I had the urge to get more Aurora kits, and I thought I'll just grab a Frankenstein, maybe a mummy. By the end of the show, I'd grabbed every one of them. So I wanted to do something different, something bright and colorful, and something very reminiscent of the Dark Ride. So this is one of the ones I bought. I hit it immediately with white primer. I then cleaned the surface. It's much easier than trying to get the enamel paint off by itself because it's 50-year-old paint. It's not going to come off easy. And then I hit it with some fluorescent paints made by Montana. So in order to get the sort of punch and glow that I wanted, and this shows the first test of that painted figure. I then wanted to do every one of the other kits I had picked up at the show, so I went through each of these. The thing about painting in this style is that most of it is white underpainting. You have to then paint very translucent layers on top of that in many stages in order to build up opacity. And even for the shadows and stuff like that, you repeatedly have to shadow areas. And when you highlight stuff like these mummy edges, it's white paint and then glazing the yellows and oranges over top of it. In the same way you can see with the Dracula, all the stuff is hand painted. You can spray bases, which helps. But this shows the collective version of all of them, and I was very satisfied with the way they came out. Very much looking like a Dark Ride haunted house ride. And then this shows the early test that I did, just using the UV light. I would take these to the store and check paints to see if they would glow. And this is the full collection once it was done. It's definitely kind of hokey, and that's sort of the vibe I was going for. Anyway, I appreciate you guys spending the time and look at this. Let me know if you have any comments or anything you're working on from an Aurora perspective, or Dark Ride stuff, or monster figure stuff.